Chapter 7 me, Chapter 7 you, Chapter 7 review. Lots of square roots. Let's get started. I'm going to attempt everything I can without the use of a calculator, which means probably page 2, I'll be using a calculator. We'll see. Alright, so we got negative square root of 41. Let's make believe that that negative is not there. I don't know what the square root of 41 is, but you know what I do know? I know what the square root of 36 is. That's 6. I know what the square root of 49 is. That's 7. Why do I care about all that? Well, because regular square root of 41 lives in between those. See, this is not a perfect square, but 36 is and 49 is. So since I don't know that, I do know that it's 6 point something. Okay? Throw a few negatives in front of it, because that's a negative, and that's a negative, and that's a negative, and I get that. So I know that the square root of negative 41 lives in between negative 6 and negative 7. Okay? Know your perfect squares. This thing just fell. Let me adjust it. Alright, I'll probably have to do that 1,000 more times during this video, so I'm going to be quick. Alright, so again, not going to use calculators until I have to, which means I'll have to for this problem. This is Pythagorean Theorem. I know it's Pythagorean Theorem because Pythagorean Theorem says that if you need to find the missing side of a right triangle, you need this guy. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. C is always your hypotenuse. Always, always, always. This tells me that this is a, so I'm going to go with it, making this b. So I have a squared plus 84 squared equals 91 squared. So 84 squared is that small number, how much I make in a day in pennies, equals 91 squared, 8281. All right. A needs to be all by itself. It's not all by itself. I have a squared in the way, and I have that large number in the way. Always get rid of the number that's floating around first by doing the opposite, and in this case, that's subtract. 8281 minus 7056 is going to be, oh, whoopsies, whoopsies. Let me do that again. 8281 minus, it'd be nice if you could see it, 7056. Why do I keep hitting the point? Ugh. 7056, enter. You can't see it, but there it is. That's a nice looking number. I wonder if anything special is going to happen with that number right there. Is A all by itself? No. Take the square root of both sides. Normally, I'd get positive and negative, whatever that number is, if I take the square root of both sides. But I don't care about negatives because we're talking about the distance of a right triangle. All I have to do is just take the square root of 1225, hit enter, and I get 35 way up there. So A equals 35. In this case, we have feet. So 35 feet is my guy. I have to fix this again. All right. Find the square root. 169 is a perfect square, which means I could take the square root of it and get a nice pretty number. In this case, if you forget what square root means, it's what number times itself gives you that guy. 169 is 13 times itself. So this becomes 13. And hello, negative, that's in front of everything. Keep that negative there, it comes along for the ride. Don't lose the negative. Don't lose the negative. Oh no, a fraction. Will that change anything? No. Square root of 16 is 4. Square root of 81 is 9. Done. Done, done, done. Cube root is a different story. Cube root is what number times itself times itself times itself gives you these numbers here. The first I don't know, 5 or 6 cubes are 1 cubed is 1, 2 cubed is 8, 3 cubed is 27, 4 cubed is 64, and 5 cubed is 125. Usually after that, you don't need to worry about it. So if I'm taking the square root, or the cube root rather, of a fraction, I have to take the cube root of 64 first, which is 8, because 8 times, no, which is 4, because 4 times 4 is 16, times another 4 is 64. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. So that's what that becomes. The answer is 4/3 circled with a blemish on the side. Perfect. Perfect cube. Evaluate the expression. Let me rewrite everything over here. -4 times the square root of 100 plus 10 times the square root of 16. -4 square root of 100. What times itself is 100? I think it's 10. Plus 10 square root of 16. What times itself is 16? I think it's 4. Making you -40, making you +4. There's no way. There's no way that this whole thing is just a nothing burger. 0. If only I had this. If only I had the answers on the back. If only I had the answers on the back. Do I? I do. Let's see. There it is. Just a reminder that the answers are on the back. Hello. All right, find the missing length of the triangle. Pythagorean Theorem. If you're trying to find the missing side of a right triangle, you have to do Pythagorean Theorem. C is always the longest side. C is already labeled as the longest side. It doesn't matter which one's A and B as long as the longest side is C. That's what my grandmom used to say. A squared is going to be 39, so 39 squared. B is 80, so 80 squared. C squared is C squared. According to my brain, 39 squared is 1521. Here's a fun fact. 8 is 64 if you square it. And if it's 80, you just add 2 zeros because that would be like saying 10 squared, which is 100. That equals C squared. Pretty sure that becomes 7921. Is C all by itself? No. What is in the way? Square root. So let's square root both sides to cancel it out. Normally we would put a plus and a minus here, but we don't because we're talking about square roots. The square root of 7921 is 89. So C is 89 feet. Which makes sense. Because, you know, if you have 80 and you just move it up 40 feet, it's going to be longer than 80, obviously. It's going to be the longest. With these, I can usually just look at my answer and estimate if it looks right or not. And so I think it looks right. Oh, look. A right triangle. Oh, look, it's missing a side. So I'm going to write the same old thing out. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. C's got to be the longest side. It doesn't matter which one I call A or B as long as C is the longest side. I'm calling A D, so D squared. I'm calling B 2.5, so 2.5 squared. And 6.5 is C squared, so 6.5 squared. Pretty sure 2.5 is 6.25? I don't know. 2.5 squared is 6.25. Look at that. D squared plus 6.25. 65, or 6.5 squared. What do I get? 42.25. That 0.25 is probably going to come in handy. Because D is not all by itself. In order to get D all by itself, I have to get rid of the squared and I have to get rid of the 6.25 floating around. Always get rid of the guy that's floating around first. By doing that, I could say 42.25 minus 6.25, which is 36. Now, why does that make me happy? Because if I square root both sides, Square root of 36 is 6. D equals positive 6 feet. Again, normally if I was just doing math, I would put plus or minus 36, but I don't do that. It's just 6 because we're talking about real life stuff here. Write the decimal as a fraction or a mixed number. If you are repeating a digit, okay, in this case I'm repeating 2 digits, I put that number over the amount of 9s that I'm repeating. Okay, so since it's 0.14 repeating, I put regular 14 over 2 9s because this is a 2-digit number. So if it was 4 repeating, I would put 4 over 1 9. If it was 148 repeating, I would put 148 over 999. Don't believe me? Go to a calculator, type out 14 divided by 99, hit enter, there it is. There's not 0.14 repeating. The way of doing this backwards, if you have zero clue what you're doing, if you have a yellow calculator, is you hit 0.14 and keep repeating 0.14 until you run into the next line. Okay, what I'm doing by doing this is I'm tricking my calculator into thinking that this is a repeating decimal. Okay, if I were to put like 0.14, it's going to think 0.14. But if I put 0.14141414, eventually the calculator right around here is going to say, you know what, that's a repeating decimal, because that's what calculators do. If you hit math frac, it's going to tell you that it's 14 over 99. So that's just a little life hack, if you will. A life hack. Dynamite Hack. Remember them? It was a band. A slide is 21 feet high as shown. What is the length of the slide, also known as the hypotenuse? Oh, hypotenuse. Well, that must mean it's a right triangle. It is. That's C. Why? Because it's the longest side. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. A squared. It doesn't matter which one's A or B as long as the longest side is C. One of these days I'm going to make a rhyme, maybe a song. I don't know, I'll get my cousin on it. 28 squared, if I'm calling that A. 21 squared, C squared. 28 squared. Let me see here. Let's put it there so you can see. 28 squared is 784. 21 squared is 441. 441. That equals C squared. I need to add those up. So 441 is already there. 784. Ah, look at that. Now, I'm no mathematician, but I have a feeling that number is going to be spectacular. Is C all by itself? No. What is in the way? Squared. Get rid of the squared by square rooting it. It's going to be a positive answer, because normally when I would square root both sides, I would put a positive or negative, but since this is Pythagorean Theorem and I'm talking about the lengths of triangles, it can't have a negative side. If I square root that number, I should get, I don't know, like or something around the mid-60s, like my dad. Hey, oh, actually, it's in the mid-30s, like me. I'm embarrassed. Now let me talk about my blunder. Let me just say I got something in the mid-60s. All right, I thought it was 65. I'm not gonna lie. I thought it was 65. It's 35. It wouldn't make sense if that was 65. If that slide was 65, it wouldn't even fit on these two lines. That's 28 and that's 21. So even if I took the ladder and knocked it down, a slide of 65, if I knocked it down, would be so big that it would overtake both of these. So this number can't be any bigger than both of these put together. And it's not. It's 35. So my answer makes sense. You got to keep in mind, like, I don't know. You got to look at your answers and make sure your answers make sense. I did a stupid thing by saying an answer without looking at my picture. I blame it on the calculator. See, this is a calculator's fault. But now I can look at my answer and be happy with what I did. And that's the point in life, huh? Being happy. Distance. You know, I really can't tell how long that is. If only I had a method where I can use, I don't know, lengths of right triangles and just draw a right triangle right there. And then call that C, because it's like the longest side of a triangle. And I'll call you A and I'll call you B, because it doesn't matter which side is A or B as long as the longest side is C. How long's A? If only I can count. Oh, 1, 2, 3. A is 3. So that would make B 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So B is 5. C is, I don't know. So A squared plus B squared equals C squared. C is D. A is 3. B is 5. C again is my distance, so D squared. That becomes 9. 3 squared is 9. That becomes 25 because 25 times itself is 25. I'm sorry, 5 times itself is 25. That equals D squared. Add those up. D is not all by itself because squared is in the way, so I got to square root both sides. For the 5th time, normally I put a plus or a minus right there, but I'm not going to put a plus or minus right there because we're talking about distance, and distance can be negative. So I get something in between 5 and 6. How do I know that? The square root of 36 is 6, so something underneath the square root of 36 is going to be underneath 6. So rounding to the nearest tenth, the square root of 34 is 5.83. Rounding to the nearest tenth is 5.8 units. Okay. I'm going to remind you that the square root of 1,225 is 35, which would make this not so bad. So if there's a dot in the middle of everything, shouldn't you just take the answer that we got up there and put a dot in the middle of everything? Oh, hello, positive or negative symbol. Why don't you join us? Please. Which number is greater? Well, let me use my calculator. Oh, I dropped it. Crash, bang, poof, bang. I lost my calculator. How embarrassing. Well, I don't know what the square root of 17 is. I don't. But this is what I do know. I do know that the square root of 16 is 4. And the next perfect square up is square root of 25, which is 5. The square root of 17 is not going to just hover in the middle of 16 and 25. 17 is not right here. Like if I were to draw this as a number line and like actually write out where it could be, like if it was an actual distance, it would be like right next to it. Which means 17 is like 0 or 4.1 or something like that. Which tells me that the square root of 17 is a whole lot smaller than 4.5. So which number is greater? 4.5. And it's because the square root of 17 is closer to 4 than it is to 5. Now let's actually find out what the square root of 17 is, just to give you a little bit of joy. My guess is 4.09. That's my guess. 4.12. So that ended up being 4.12. And you could say because 4.12 is smaller than 4.5. You know, it's funny. I said 4.5 up here and drew a line, and as I was writing that out, 4.5 landed on that line. It's as if someone is smiling down on me. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, wait, I found my calculator. Tell whether the triangle with the given side lengths is a right triangle. You know, I can't just look at it and determine. I wonder if there's a formula of some kind that would help me out with right triangle. There is. A squared plus B squared equals C squared, the Pythagorean Theorem. That tells me everything I need to know about right triangles. Usually what I do is I use this to find the missing side of a right triangle. But if I'm given all 3 sides, I can use it to find out if something is a right triangle or not. So, I need to pick out letters for this. Which one should I pick for anything? Let me see. Well, I have a 10, I have a 10.5, and a 14.5. Interesting. That's longer than the others. I wonder if there's a letter over here that represents the longest side of a right triangle. Your C. And it doesn't matter which one's A or B as long as the longest side is C. 10.5 squared. 10 squared. 14.5 squared. Now you might be thinking, what exactly am I solving for? I'm not solving for anything. I'm just seeing if this guy matches up with that guy. 10.5 squared. Squared. is 110.25. 10 squared is 100. 14.5 squared, 210.25. Add these two up. 210.25 equals 210.25. Do those equal each other? Yes. So is it a right triangle? Yes. All right. No one likes these problems, but you're going to see them. You definitely will see them. 4. A car leaves a parking ramp and travels 5 miles due east. Car makes a 90-degree turn and travels 12 miles due north. The car has enough gas in the tank to travel 12.7 miles. Can the car make it back to the parking lot ramp using a direct route? Explain your reasoning. So let me pretend that I didn't read that. And let me see if I can get hung up on what a lot of people do when they get these types of problems wrong. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. You know that by now. That's c. You know that by now. It doesn't matter which one is the a or the b because the longest side is always c. So 5 squared, 12 squared, c squared, 25, 144, c squared. Add them up. Is c all by itself? Nope. Squared's in the way. Square root it. Positive answers only. So what are we talking about? Blocks? Miles, right? So normally a lot of people just circle 13 or say 13 miles and call it a day. But remember, the problem is not find the missing side. The problem is you have enough gas to travel 12.7 miles. Can you make it back home? Well, if I have 12.7 miles and I need to go home and it's 13 miles, I don't have enough gas. So can the car make it back to the parking ramp? No, because the car needs to travel 13 miles. And 13 miles isn't going to do it if I only have 12.7. You should have thought this through, you who's driving the car, or whatever person in imaginary math land is doing it. Silly goose. I think I made a mistake by including this. Let's just do it anyway. I did make a mistake by including this, but you know what? No, I didn't. Looking at this and reading it, no, I'm fine with it. The area of the sail is 162 square feet. So this sail is a triangle. So if you see a problem like this, and you probably won't, this is a tricky problem, you should be able to say, all right, well, the area of a triangle is half times base times height. Okay? The area of this sail is 162. So 162 is going to replace my A. That's going to equal half of base times height. But wait a minute. The base and the height are the same. So if I were to say that the base and the height are the same, I can just call that HB because they're the same, right? So instead of saying B times H, I could say B times B or B squared. Oh. Is B all by itself? No. A half is in the way and squared is in the way. Now, I've been waiting a long time to say this, but normally what I would do right now is divide both sides by a half. But instead of dividing a fraction, multiply the reciprocal. 1 over 2 has a reciprocal of 2, and we're going to multiply both sides by 2. That gives me b squared equals, I think that's 324, but I'm really paranoid for some reason. 162 times 2 is 324. Why do I even doubt myself? I shouldn't. Is b all by itself? No. Squared is in the way, so I have to square root everything, Positive answers only. Oh, and I get a nice little 18. The base is 18. So what is the height of the sail in feet? 18 feet, of course, because we got 18 for the base, and if the base and the height are the same, And then the height is 18. That's weird. I don't know. Will you see a problem like that on a test? Probably not. But you know what? You can't say you weren't prepared. You can't say that. You can't. 2 more pages, but they're busy pages. Are you ready? How high is the kite? That's in the air. That creates a triangle. A right triangle. I need to find this missing thing, this height. So I'll call it h. And why don't I use this guy that I've only used like a billion, trillion, gazillion times? A squared plus b squared equals c squared. We have to call you c because it's the longest. So I'll call you a and I'll call you b because it doesn't matter which is the longest, as long as the longest one is c. A is h squared. B is 105. We'll square it. C is 145. We'll square that. 105 squared is that small number right there, how much I make in a week. And that guy is that number right there. Now look at those numbers. I wonder if anything magical is going to happen. Probably not. Probably not. Is h all by itself? No. Squared's in the way. And that number that's floating around's in the way. Always get rid of the number floating around first. Let me get my calculator and type it in. Oh, wow. That gets to be that number. I wonder how that happened. Is h all by itself? No. Square root both sides. Normally, I would say positive or negative. But you know what? I think we're talking about a height here. Yeah, we are. The height is going to end up being 100 because the square root of 10,000 is 100. I wonder how that happened. 100 what? 100 billion years? Oh, no, feet. How high is the kite? 100 feet. Makes sense. Makes sense because this length is similar to that length and they are almost the same length. Cube root. The cube root of 512. If you don't know what a cubed root is, remember cubed root means what number times itself times a third time gets you that. So if you don't know how to find the cube root, or if you don't have it memorized, what you do on a calculator is you hit math in this case, and the cube root is that button number 4. Math 4, 512, enter. And it's 8. That means 8 times 8 times 8 is 512. Tell whether the number is rational or irrational. Remember, rational means it can be written as a fraction. And if it's written as a fraction, it means it could stop. Terminates is another word. Terminator. Arnold Schwarzenegger. It stops, or it follows some kind of pattern, right? What I mean by it stops is if there's a decimal like 5.33 and that's it, it stopped. If it's 5.3 repeating, 3, that follows a pattern. If it's 5.3 or 5.312, 312, 312, 312, that's also a pattern. If it's something all wacky, it's not rational, it's irrational, which means it goes on forever and has no pattern. Like pi or e. And you don't know what e is yet until you get to Algebra 2. Look, it looks like you're repeating 1/6. So this would be 8.3, 1/6, 1/6, 1/6, 1/6. That's a pattern. That's a pattern, which means this is rational. Now remember how I said pi is irrational? That's because pi, this button, is 3.14159 blah, 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 blah. That number, the calculator stops it, but normally it would go on forever, and there's no pattern. 1415926 oh boy, 4. So if I have pi, which is irrational, and then divide it by 8, it's not going to magically become pretty all of a sudden. It's going to become irrational. Okay? 4, if we square root it, is 2. Last time I checked, 2 ain't a problem. So that's rational. Oh, look, a familiar friend. Square root of 63 versus 9. I don't know what the square root of 63 is, but I know what the square root of 64 is, and that's 8. 63 is right underneath 64, which means square root of 63 is going to be 7 point something, 7.9-ish. Okay? Which one's bigger? 7.9-ish or regular old 9? 9. Because the square root of 63 is 7 point something, blah, 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 which is smaller than 9. No calculator needed. These are the types of problems that you would see often. Oh, whoops. These are the types of problems that you would see often, like on a PSSA or any other type of test without a calculator, because you should be able to see the square root of 63 and say, well, the square root of 64 is 8 and 63 is smaller than 9, or 64, which means that's smaller than 9. So, okay? You guys are doing great. Let me fix my calculator before I get yelled at. Okay, problem 12, same exact directions as last time. Let's use our calculator for these, because now we're getting to the larger numbers. And when you hit the larger numbers, you're just never sure. So let me rewrite these out and find out what these numbers are as decimals, okay? Square root of 190. And I'm done. 13.784 blah, blah, blah. This is going to be 14 point, I don't know, 1 divided by 6. 1 divided by 6 is 1, 6 repeating. So even though I didn't have to do that in my calculator, I'm already done. My job was to find which one's larger. 14.16 is larger because 14.16 repeating is greater than 13.784 blah, 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 blah. Cool. Tell whether the triangle with the given side lengths is a right triangle. So, is that the rules for all of these? That's the rules for all of these. And this is how we're ending the day. Right triangle, side lengths, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, so you'll be c because you're the longest side. You'll be a and you'll be b because it doesn't really matter which one's a or b as long as the longest side is c. 16 squared plus 30 squared has to equal 34 squared. What I'm doing to see if a triangle is right is I'm plugging it into Pythagorean Theorem, and if the math on the left matches the math on the right, I did it right. 16 squared, I feel like I should know that. Yeah, I should. Plus 30 squared is 900. 34 squared. 1156. 256 plus 900 is 1156. And since 1156 equals 1156, we do have a right triangle. Okay, so that's what we're doing. If at any point we plug stuff in and these guys don't match, it's not a right triangle. Okay? All right. You must be my C, you can be my A, and you can be my B. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. You will be 5 over 13 squared plus 12 over 13 squared equals 1 squared. You know what? I don't need a calculator. I'll use the calculator for 17 because that's just rough. Let's do, what am I doing? 25 over 169. How did I do that in my head? Because 5 squared is 25. 13 squared is 169. That's how I did it in my head. 144 over 169. Same reasoning. 12 squared is 144. 13 squared is 169. 1 squared is 1. If I add these guys up, you add the tops and keep the bottom the same as long as you have that common denominator, which I do. 25 plus 144 is 169. 169 divided by itself is 1. Does 1 equal 1? Yeah, I think so. I did it! That's what my son would say. You're my A. You're my B, you're my C. Why? C is 21 because 21 is the biggest number out of all of these. So if I did a squared plus b squared equals a squared, I would have 14 squared plus 18 squared equals 21 squared. I don't have a good feeling about this one. I really don't, because I have two evens and I have an odd that it's supposed to equal, so I have a feeling something's going to go pear-shaped, as a pirate would say, 196 plus, I feel like I did an 18 squared already in this thing. Maybe. 324, that number seems familiar. Equals 21 squared. I know I did that. That's the 441. Add these up. You get, trying to do this in my head, and I'm struggling. No. 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 You would have to be my A. You would have to be my B. You would have to be my C. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. A, B, C. 24 squared plus 45 squared equals 51 squared. 24 squared is 576. 45 squared is 2025. 51 squared is 2601. Add these guys up, and you get 2601. Last one, boys and girls. Last one. And it's that mess. Yellow calculators are not good with mixed numbers. I don't like my numbers mixed. I like them improper. So this is what I'm going to do. Or I could just do this. I'm going to turn these into decimals. Again, these guys are not good with mixed numbers. They're not. I don't even know how to do a mixed number in this. That would be good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these into decimals. I know you're 0.8. 3 divided by 5, if you don't know, is 0.6. So 1 and 3 over 5 is 1.6. And 1/5 is 0.2. And if you don't know, 1 divided by 5 is 0.2. So you get 2.2. And if you know how to do an improper fraction in these yellow calculators, leave a comment. Leave a comment. You have to be C. You can be B and you can be A. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So I'll do 0.8 squared plus 1.6 squared equals 2.2 squared. 0.8 squared should be 6.4. Or is it one? Hold on. Oh, look, I'll just use you. 0.64. 1.6 squared. 2.56. 2.2 squared. 4.84. 0.64 plus 2.56 is not going to be that number right there. So Houston, you have a problem. That's a no. It's a big NO, baby. So that's it. That's chapter 7. It's chapter 7. So make sure you check your work, check the answers in the back, watch this video. Thank you for watching. Bye.